His 14-year-old daughter, Jamie, was killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, a few months ago. He was on my show, The Lead, on Friday, talking about the horrific incident in Santa Fe, Texas. My panel's here with me. Governor Granholm, let me start with you. You were governor of a state where gun rights are important, Michigan.
Yep.
It's a state President Trump won in 2016. Governor Abbott of Texas says thoughts and prayers are not enough. It's an interesting comment from a Republican governor because that's been something that Democrats have been using against Republicans. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. What should he do?
Well, he certainly didn't say what he would do. You can do all of the above. 97% of gun owners want to see background checks. 85% of gun owners want to make sure that people with mental illness don't have access to firearms. We can cite all the stats, 35,000 people killed last year in gun violence, that we are 25 times more likely to be killed in this country than in other countries. We respect hunting. That is not what this is about. I feel like Fannie Lou Hamer. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm taking a whole new strategy on this. Instead of yelling at this, instead of looking at Dan Patrick up there saying we ought to add, we ought to ban doors instead of looking at access to guns, I'm saying there's one solution. Mm-hmm. The one solution is at the ballot box. Take them out at the ballot box if they do not agree that we should have common sense gun solutions. That's it. We got to elect people who will do what the voters want.
You're from you're from a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania where gun rights are important as well.
But so Governor, you heard Jake just ask Senator Warner the question about during the 80s when Democrats ran the White House, both houses of Congress. You could have acted. You could have done all this.
Take out Democrats who want to.
You didn't do anything.
I'm saying
so
I
changing
want
the electorate is not going to change.
No,
Listen,
changing the people who are in office.
It's not going to change.
Absolutely it will.
What we need, and I think you'll agree, is we need to really take a hard look at mental health in this country.
We need to do that too. Okay? We need to do that too. That's not it.
Listen, Governor, I grew up in a state in Western Pennsylvania. Guns were prevalent. They were laying around basements. They were in cars. Kids didn't go into schools and shoot people. They didn't do it. It didn't happen. Something has changed in this culture, right? There's a famous quote, which I know you're familiar with. Violence, right? Violence is the language of the unheard, right? Martin Luther King, right? Which I know you're familiar with that quote because I read it in one of your speeches. And something is going on here where these people feel that they're not being heard and they're acting out. And so
I agree. All right, so let's do something with mental health and let's restrict access to guns by those who need mental health.
Linda Chavez, I want to play some sound from a student on Friday that just absolutely broke my heart about the hopelessness that students today feel that I don't think they felt when any of us were in high school. Let's roll that sound.
Was there a part of you that was like, this isn't real, this would not happen in my school?
No. There wasn't.
Why so?
It's been happening everywhere. I've always kind of felt like eventually it was going to happen here too. So, I don't know. I wasn't surprised, I was just scared.
I mean, that just absolutely breaks my heart that that's what kids are growing up with.
Absolutely breaks my heart, too. I have 9 grandkids, and, the thought that one of them could face this is terrifying. I agree with both David and Jennifer on this issue. I do think we need some gun laws. I mean, this wasn't a case of an AR-15, but I still think we ought to ban AR-15s. I think they're military weapons that don't belong with individual civilians. I think we ought to make people who do not lock up their guns and who give access to their guns liable. I think that if they were more liable, people would be more responsible. But I also think there is a crisis in this culture right now, and teenagers in particular. I don't know what's happened, and we don't really seem to have a handle on it. It's not just individual mental health. We're talking about a culture that breeds this violence, and frankly, the attention we're spending on this, I think, probably also encourages copycats.
And I want to ask you this, Congresswoman, because one of the things I've heard from women in the last couple of days, especially after it came out that the mom of one of the students killed, a girl, said that this alleged shooter, had been asking her out a number of times. She rebuffed him. One time, maybe she even embarrassed him last week, and that she was one of the first people, if not the first person, killed. We saw recently an incident in Maryland where a boy went and shot, I believe, his ex-girlfriend. And there is talk about a crisis of culture. There's something that I've been hearing from a lot of women about. We're raising our boys wrong. that they feel like they're entitled to things from girls, and sometimes it goes way wrong. What do you
I think that just started now. If you look at the women killed through domestic violence,
Sure.
that's through guns most of the time. So this is not a new phenomenon. I associate myself with many of the comments that have already been made. Yes, we do need to change who's in Congress. I disagree with you about that. We definitely need to change. We actually have, for background checks, we have 208 co-sponsors, bipartisan. We've never had that many before. Speaker Ryan won't call the bill to the floor. It's as simple as that. Some people won't be a sponsor, but they'll vote for the bill when it comes to the floor. They won't entertain the bill. They won't even give us a chance
Democrats
to vote.
didn't do anything on gun control, though, when they controlled the House, Senate, and White House from 2009 to 2011. They did nothing.
That may be true, but I think, every day, I think people are more conscious of what's going on, and I feel like the voice I brought to Congress was, we always talk about the mass shootings in school, but we don't talk about the everyday that goes on in some of the other areas.
Look at Chicago, 1,400 kids, people killed on the streets of Chicago in the past 2 years. That's an epidemic. That should be addressed.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. But it's access.
Well, the state legislature could act.
No,
They're not doing it.
they have moved.
But where are they
The
getting the
states
guns
are doing
from?
better than the
They're
feds.
getting guns from Indiana that are coming across
Indiana
the border.
and
Look at
Wisconsin.
of the top 27 largest mass shootings in the history of the United States. The 10 of them have happened in the past 10 years. 13 of them have happened in the past 10 years. There's an acceleration of this. There's no doubt.
So what causes it?
Well,
It's a
access
multitude.
to guns makes it
It's more than that. Access to guns.
But you're saying it's more than
It
that.
is.
It's not like-
It is more than that.
Look, I absolutely believe we have to have common sense gun control. But there is something really deeply sick
Absolutely.
about this culture. I mean, and it's not just, these are the most grotesque acts of violence, but the way in which people disrespect each other. And, that comes from the top on down.
Can't we work
We've
on
just,
both?
So
Yeah, we
look at
work on both.
go to
It's a multitude of
SandyHookPromise.org.
things.
The Sandy Hook organization has an incredible program. If you have a gun, keep it safe and secure. No child eats alone. It's easier to build a child than repair an adult.
And they also have a great program about looking at kids in
Right,
schools
absolutely.
and giving them the attention
Right?
they need.
Absolutely.
We need to take
All of that needs to happen.
We need to take a quick break and talk about some other subjects as well. Coming up, the moderates versus the conservatives. Is Republican infighting a symptom of larger issues within the party's leadership? The panel will weigh in on that next. Stay with us.
Maybe their benefits.
I was talking about the MS-13, and also, and if you look a little bit further on in the tape, you'll see that. So when the MS-13 comes in, when the other gang members come into our country, I refer to them as animals, and guess what? I always will.
That was President Trump defending and attempting to clear up comments in which he used the term animals to describe criminals who are in this country illegally. He says he was referring specifically to gang members from MS-13. The president came under fire from Democrats who took his comments to mean he was referring to all undocumented immigrants or even possibly legal immigrants to the United States. My panel's back with me. Let me start with you, Linda Chavez. I took his comments to mean, in the context of the question and everything, to be referring to MS-13. But the president does speak vaguely, and he does have a history of conflating violent criminals with regular undocumented immigrants who are not violent.
or even just immigrants, period. I mean, when he went down the escalator and announced for presidency, he's talked about Mexicans, not even Mexican immigrants, but Mexicans as rapists. And so, he wasn't talking about illegal immigrants there. He was talking about all Mexicans. So the president does have a history with this. I mean, okay, so MS-13, I think you could use a lot of words to describe MS-13. Interestingly, their victims are overwhelmingly other immigrants. So this is not a gang that inflicts wanton damage in our streets. It goes and targets other immigrants. But this is part of a much bigger problem of the demonization of immigrants in the United States that this administration has been involved in, encourages, and frankly, it is frightening.
What do you think, President Trump making a big deal out of the fact that, in his view, the fake news media, I'm quoting him now, the fake news media purposefully twisted his words?
Everybody did have to walk it back, so he is correct in that regard. And the president, as Linda correctly points out, look, MS-13, they're not nice people, to say it mildly.
That's a violent gang.
It's an incredibly violent gang. I think the president was speaking specifically about that. And it gets caught up in this bigger DACA debate and what we're going to do with folks who are here that we don't want to get rid of, that kids who came here and no fault of their own They're stuck here, and how do we deal with them? And it's really a difficult issue. It should be solved pretty easily. President Obama couldn't get it done with a Democratic Congress, so he tried to act and do something, maybe a little bit outside of his power, and President Trump is left with it, trying to clean it up. And that's why the Farm Bill failed, really.
So Governor, one of the issues, and we'll get to that in a second about the Farm Bill, but one of the issues that I've heard Trump supporters and even non-Trump supporters who are conservatives talk about is now Democrats are defending MS-13. Now Democrats are saying, hey, they're not animals. We shouldn't talk about people that way. And is that really where the Democratic Party wants to be? What do you think?
No, I mean, of course not. Nobody is defending MS-13. But what concerns me is that he is conflating all immigrants with MS-13. He's using MS-13, which is a horrible organization. You can call them all sorts of names. He's using them to justify mass deportations or slowing people who are seeking asylum, ripping children from their parents at the border who are coming from Central American countries who may be victims of violent gangs instead of perpetrators of violent gangs. Is that real? And this is all being done in our name as America. Is this really who we are? And I worry that what he's doing is sort of zhuzhing everything together so that everybody gets mad at all immigrants in order to justify the border wall.
And Congresswoman, let's talk about the issue that David brought up, which has to do with the fact that there are some moderate Republicans teaming up with Democrats to force a vote on an immigration bill that would provide a path to some sort of legal status for the Dreamers under DACA. Here's one of the movement's leaders, Republican Congressman Jeff Denham.
I have asked the Speaker every single week, give us a timeline when these bills, when we can have a full debate in front of the American people, and we failed to get one, and so we're forcing one.
Is this going to happen? Republicans and Democrats, the moderate Republicans who are joining with Democrats, only need 5 more Republicans to join with them to push this. Is it going to happen?
I actually thought it was closer than that.
Oh, is that right?
On
Okay.
Friday. I don't know what the number quite is, but I'm feeling positive that it's going to happen, but then you never know, because things change. I don't know if people get intimidated and then they don't want to do anything. I don't know what the Speaker is saying to his side of the aisle, but I'm hoping it's going to happen.
Speaker Ryan does not want this to happen. The moderates need it because they feel like they're vulnerable, the moderate Republicans. But base Republicans do not want an immigration bill.
They don't want to vote because they don't have the vote to pass the anti-legal immigration bill that the Freedom Caucus is supporting, which would reduce legal immigration by 50% at a time when we have the lowest unemployment that we've had in years. So this is, if it does get to the floor, if we are able to get a vote on it, it will pass. The question is then, what will the Senate do? I think there's actually a chance the Senate would pass it. And I think President Trump would be forced to actually sign it if a bill came to him, particularly if it also included money for the wall.
Listen, let's not forget how we got here, okay? Let's just press the rewind button. This is in 2012, President Obama couldn't get this done. He couldn't get it done.
So he did it by executive order.
So he did it saying this is going to be a temporary action to get it done. He kicked the can down the road himself, and he left this because he couldn't get it done himself. So
Well,
to think that somehow
President Trump created this document.
President Trump
did not.
Yeah, he
because
ended it.
What happened with
the
DAPA?
problem that
Listen,
we're
you guys all know,
dealing
you know
with
all
now.
too well.
He fixed
The
this.
DAPA, listen, DAPA for the parents was struck down by the court. 5 attorney generals were going to sue on DACA.
Right.
The president deferred action on this, said, I don't want to do this, Congress. Take an action. The president said to do it. We're all here because President Obama couldn't get it done.
But he didn't have to undo the
President
executive
Obama
order.
is not president anymore. Right
We
now,
could've
it's
got it
Donald
done. He
Trump.
could've dealt with it. Why didn't he deal with
Donald
it?
Trump,
Why didn't he deal with it?
Because he
Governor?
tried and he had a
And he
Republican
failed.
House and
And he
Senate.
failed.
Hello?
No, he
Come on.
didn't
failed.
try when he had both houses.
Linda, listen,
He was working on
wait, stop.
the
Wait, wait,
Affordable
wait.
Care
That's an
Act.
important point. That's an
Right now.
important
He was
point.
working on the
made the point like
Affordable
Governor
Care
Graham.
Act.
But that's an important point that Linda said.
All right.
Okay.
Right now, Donald Trump is the president. He could fix this. He blew it up. He could fix it. He is not doing that. This is a midterm election. This is why you've got 20-plus Republicans.
What's your
Let's
prediction?
hear from Linda.
What's going
Let's
to
hear
happen?
from Linda.
Is it going to pass the House? Is it going to pass the Senate? Is President Trump going to sign it or veto it?
I guess, does Stephen Miller like it? Well, so if he doesn't like it, I wonder. And that's why the answer to this question, like the last one, is November. People,
Listen,
go
Linda
to the
Chavez,
polls
no
and
supporter of
vote.
President Trump, says Obama
he'll-
couldn't get it done with
true.
the Democratic Congress.
Great panel. Thank you so much, one and all. Some might call him American political royalty. President John F. Kennedy's grandson is now carrying on his family's legacy. What might JFK have thought about today's political climate? I'll talk to Jack Kennedy Schlossberg next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Courage can sometimes feel in short supply in today's politics, but this evening, the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library will honor political courage. I spoke with President John F. Kennedy's grandson, Jack Kennedy Schlossberg, about how his grandfather might have viewed today's political climate and asked him why the library selected New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu to receive this year's Profile in Courage Award.
We're giving it to Mitch Landrieu this year, not just for what he did in removing 4 Confederate statues from his city in New Orleans, but also for how he did it. He offered his city and his country a compassionate and eloquent explanation for why he thought that decision was the right one.
I recognize that it's gone to Democrats and Republicans, but I wonder, has it ever gone to somebody who did something that was a tough decision and you actually think they were wrong?
I know in the past, one decision that was somewhat controversial was the decision to give the award to Gerald Ford for pardoning Richard Nixon, which I think was a very it was a great decision to give him that award for doing so, and Gerald Ford helped the country in doing that. But I think that there were a lot of people who were upset, and at the time, I mean, I obviously wasn't alive, but I think that oftentimes the picks are controversial, but that just speaks to how important courage is.
Is there anyone you think, were your namesake alive today, were President John F. Kennedy alive today, is there anyone in Washington, D.C. that he would look at and think, that person is a profile in courage? Are you seeing many of those in Washington today?
Well, I can't speak for my grandfather. He's obviously not around today. I think that he would be very proud of how the Democratic Party has acted since 1963 and until today. I think that he would have been proud of President Obama's tenure in office and his decision to enter into a nuclear agreement with Iran, despite facing enormous political consequences for doing that. The same with the Paris Agreement and hosts of many other issues.
We've seen a number of people in the next generation of Kennedys running for office. Your cousin Joe Kennedy, a congressman from Massachusetts, is a rising star. You are currently studying law at Harvard and pursuing your MBA. Do you feel an obligation towards public service? Is that part of the family ethos that you need to run for office someday?
I'm certainly proud of my family's legacy of public service. It's something that I'm inspired by, and it's inspired a lot of the choices I've made in life so far. I don't know what the future holds. I certainly don't feel any pressure from anyone in my family to do anything. But what I do know is that we can demand a lot more out of our politics.
And our thanks to Jack Kennedy Schlossberg for that interview. Our congratulations to Mayor Mitch Landrieu for the award. Coming up, 2 constitutional scholars on how a president might be impeached and if the Trump White House could be in trouble. That's next.